Oh, yay, David! Yay!
Hello babies and welcome back to my channel. I'm David, you're David, we're all David. Do you remember that episode of SpongeBob? Welcome to my series called Dismantling Hate here on YouTube, and you have landed yourself on episode 18. So if you like this content, if you just love the sound of my voice, make sure to check out my playlist of all of these other videos. Now we are going to get into a short film called American Groomer, and the tagline is, "The kids are not all right." If you've seen episode 17 of Dismantling Hate, we looked at an interview from a woman with Gays Against Groomers.
Eat glass!
I forget her name, it doesn't matter. I'm sure we'll be introduced to her again shortly. But she created a short film called American Groomer, The Kids Are Not All Right. It's a 36-minute short film that apparently is fighting against the trans agenda, or the trans ideology, or whatever pejorative infantilized glitter speak we're about to subject ourselves to. Now, you may notice that I have half of a makeup look on right now, so I'm gonna do that while we react to this 36-minute short film that is called American Groomer. I'm sorry, I keep saying the title, but it's really bad. Now here's my disclaimer before we get into this girly pops, is I do not want you to go to the profiles of these individuals and incite hate to them, because we may not have Michelle Obama's arms, but we do have her attitude, because when they go low, we go high.
It's very nice of you to say, David.
We are here to cringe, laugh, provide some evidence-based explanations as to why what these people are purporting in these things are nonsensical and harmful. Hopefully it takes us less than 14 hours to get through this 36-minute video. So this can be accessed online at americangroomerfilm.com. Let's have a look at the description here. American Groomer is a documentary revealing the disturbing truth about the sexualization of children in American schools. The average citizen is totally unaware of the societal, physical, emotional, and behavioral dangers of this appalling, astonishing fetish. Kids are being introduced to kink, taught incompetent science behind STDs, and are being encouraged to make dangerous choices. And in 39 states, starting a sentence with "and." Maybe American schools need to be focused on grammar a little bit more. It is perfectly legal to show your kids the filthiest porn available in schools? Yes, really. Produced by Elena Barbera of Sunny, Faz, and Elena, the based mother on YouTube. God, you know, let's take a deep breath collectively here. We need some Wim Hof breathing. All right, here we go.
Once upon a time, adults went out of their way to keep children innocent. Kids had fairy tales, sandlots, recess, and bedtime stories. Their innocence was occasionally dinged by adult topics through eavesdropping or the rumor mill. Today, forget about it. It's total immersion, and kids can't get away from things they're not ready for. Culture warriors are telling us that kids are ready for sex from birth, and most shocking of all, this ideology's wormed its way into our schools. What can parents do when they just want to let nature take its course and do what's become unpopular, letting kids be kids? Up until about 5 minutes ago, I was your average American mother. Then Sunny put me on YouTube.
About 5, okay, stop it. Oh God, of course we freeze on Andrew Tate. Okay, the montage of clips in the beginning, yes. Are some of those things that we saw there inappropriate? Absolutely. Like the sex toys, like I don't know what the context was of that kid pulling out that sex toy from that box, but really there isn't a context that makes that appropriate in my opinion. So some of these things should not be happening. I can absolutely get on board and agree with that. The problem comes when you're equating trans rights and trans people just simply existing out in the world with this inappropriate sexual behavior that they believe is happening in schools. Honestly, all of the clips that they just showed, none of them involved schools, except for maybe the one where the kids were running down the hallway with the pride flags. Pride is okay. Pride is not inappropriate. Pride is completely fine to have in schools because it's human rights, it's equality, it's fine. But I do agree that if there are like those outdoor shows, like there was a lot of nudity outdoors and that kind of stuff, I'm of the opinion that I don't think children should be around those things. But really, it does create a larger conversation here about, does a naked human body inherently imply sexuality? Because I don't know, a lot of these people come from the framework of talking about religion, right? So if we think of Adam and Eve, like were they not naked as well? I believe they were naked, you know, out in public, but that's okay. It doesn't necessarily imply sexuality. But there are like outdoor fairs, there are like kink festivals, like Folsom Fair and things like that do exist. And a lot of those things are sexualized, and I can understand and acknowledge that. However, not all of them are. And I think there's a huge amount of nuance that is missed by this community, but they are weaponizing that lack of nuance in order to attack the queer community as a whole, which is what I have a problem with. And if you are using Andrew Tate to solidify your point, ooh, it's only down from here. It's only down from here. So I'm gonna try and turn my body here so I can continue my makeup look, but we'll see.
Based mother.
What began as fun turned into a mission I never saw coming, to stop the sexualization of children in American schools. You won't believe what I found out.
Oh god.
The effort to ban books is accelerating across this country.
What's really going on? Are there obscene books in schools, or are these parents unhinged? Their opponents are calling them transphobes, Nazis, religious zealots, white supremacists, every name in the book. Supporters of the book say they're essential reading for teaching kids about inclusion and love.
And I think that's what makes books like these really important and in a lot of ways beautiful toward the human experience, because they tell us what it's like to be someone else.
Well, exactly. There needs to be inclusion. There needs to be queer and trans representation in stories that is held to the same standard as their non-queer counterparts in stories. Like mainstream media and all of the stories that we see, like if they're worried about sexualizing children, there are like even your most basic like nursery rhymes and like story fairy tales and stuff like that, like Snow White up in the tower and getting saved by the knight in shining armor. Like a lot of that does imply like sexuality and sexual attraction and things. Like I don't think that kind of idea should be portrayed in children's content either. I'm not on one side here. I think if we're going to do it from one side, we need to do it from all sides. But they don't care about the sexualization of stories when it has to do with a heteronormative outlook, but they do have a problem when it's from a homosexual outlook, which is discriminatory. Yeah. I was really hoping I'd be able to get my face done in this 30-minute video, but I don't think that's going to happen, but I'll try.
The gender queer can't wrap her pretty little head around what the problem is.
So I think the page that you're talking about is one where there is a scene of two queer adults. That page is about consent. The character asks the other character, like says, I am uncomfortable with what we're doing. Can we stop what we're doing? And the other partner says, yes, of course. And it's really troubling to me that this page is called out as like so, inappropriate for young people. And I'm like, no, teenagers need to know about consent.
It's easy to agree that young people should be taught about consent and respect. But in this radio interview, just like in so much other media coverage, the book's content was described as helpful and innocent. The excerpts in question tell a different tale.
I got a new strap-on harness today. I can't wait to put it on. You will fit my favorite dildo perfectly.
You are going to look so hot. I can't wait to have your cock in my mouth.
I'm going to give you the blowjob of your life. Then I want you inside me.
Okay, holy cats. Yeah, I think I now have an understanding of what they mean by the cartoonish pornographic content. But like, is this something, okay, I dropped some of my primer, but like, okay, so what I paused on here, is this appropriate for children? No, it's not. But I have a really hard time believing that this book would be in a school library at any age. I don't think this is appropriate for any school age. Like, I don't think this should even be in a high school. And I can get on board with that. But like, or is this just a graphic novel for like young adults, right? Like if you're 18, like there's so many adult novels. This strikes me as smut, right? As like 50 Shades of Grey. And these kinds of graphic novels do exist. And I think that they can exist and they should exist, but the audience should not be, and I don't believe that the author of this would want the audience to be children as well. So I think they're using this as like as like proof to be like, see, this is what they're teaching our kids. But like, I don't think, like I'm keeping an open mind here because I might be proved wrong, but I just have a really hard time believing that this was in middle schools.
I love all kind of people, all genders, he, she, straight, bisexual, gay, whatever, but this is wrong for a child to see that right now.
Even the American Library Association has its hands in this.
Most polls suggest that people trust their teachers, they trust their librarians.
In 2020, the organization gave their coveted Alex Award to genderqueer. Every year, it's given to 10 books written for adults that have special appeal to kids ages 12 through 18.
How is that special appeal? Ooh, yeah, it's just messy. It's just not the same thing. It's not...
It's special, all right.
There are just so many beautiful images in this book involving natural objects.
I live in Canada and it's just absurd what's in the public school system.
You have it too?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's why we homeschool our children.
I think that's probably a little bit more liberal than we would be using for most of the time in England at home.
Sadly, she's wrong. It's over there too. But just like most American parents, she thinks it's not happening in her town. The strap-on scene from genderqueer isn't even the worst thing in these books. And we're not just talking about one book, we're talking about dozens at least.
Like, okay, these books are not appropriate for children, I can get on board with that, but does that mean they should be banned? Like, should any content that's not appropriate for a child be banned? No. It's the onus is on the parents and the librarians and the teachers and the administrators and school councils and things like this to keep children away from these things that are inappropriate. Like, then why does 50 Shades of Grey exist? Why does pornography pornography exist in general. There are so many things in our world that are not appropriate for children, and the onus is on the parents to create an environment where their children are safe from these things until it is an age-appropriate time of 18 or 17 or 16, the age of consent, depending on what the parents deem as appropriate for their own children. I agree with a lot of the things that's happening so far, but it's not like elementary teachers or middle school, hell, even high school teachers aren't sitting down with these books. It's just...
Where does it stop? Which ideas do you guys stop at and get comfortable with? That this bothers you because it's openly pornographic and kids can get it. Okay, but where do you draw the line?
The line, Mr. Cuomo, is sexual abuse. The National Society for the Prevention of...
Again, kids can get it. Yeah, sure. When I was a teenager, I was accessing inappropriate content like this, but that's because I had a lack of education from both parents and from the education system. Inappropriate content is out there. Why are we only focusing on the queer content that's inappropriate? Why not the straight content? Why aren't we actively working to shut down Pornhub? You know what I mean? Like, how is it only this that we're concerned about?
To children in the UK defines childhood sexual abuse clearly. It's divided into two categories, non-contact and contact. There's a list of behaviors that constitute non-contact sexual abuse, and it includes showing a child pornography and forcing a child to have sexual conversations.
Like this page where it talks about how to sext, how to take nudes of yourself, but make sure to cover any personal markings.
This is children.
This is in Let's Talk About It.
This is obvious. It's illegal to distribute child pornography, and you get in serious trouble. And it doesn't actually matter if you're a child when you do it. So they're basically setting children up to have their entire lives ruined, to be on the sex offender watch list.
Commit federal crimes.
Yeah,
yes.
Commit federal crimes.
And there is a paragraph in there that says check the local laws to see, because you might not be old enough to do this. Very lighthearted, cartoonish. Now, how many kids do you know follow every rule that you lay out for them, or have the wherewithal to check federal statutes?
Children jump before looking, right? Like how many children are constantly breaking arms? They're constantly getting themselves in trouble. Like, your childhood is supposed to be when you're learning, right? When you're learning from mistakes. You're supposed to be able to make mistakes as a child, but the mistakes that these people are encouraging them to make are life destroying. These pictures never go away. They're never actually deleted. It's always out there, even if it's legal, even if you don't get in legal trouble. There's going to be naked pictures of you on the internet for your children, for your grandchildren.
All of these things I can peripherally agree with, but if I think from my experience, I made a lot of these mistakes. I did a lot of these, when I was a teen, I made a lot of these mistakes that they're talking about these kids making now. I didn't have this kind of content. I didn't grow up around this content. I grew up around a void of all of this content. So these kids are going to be making these mistakes from an informed perspective, or they're going to be making these mistakes from an uninformed, malinformed, uninformed. You either educate them or you don't, and there's ways to do that in age-appropriate fashions.
Great-grandchildren to see. It's totally nuts. And it's the society that our corrupted elites have created for us.
I think maybe it just opens kids up to things that they're just not ready for.
Not ready for it. Wait till you're 18 years old, 21, then you explore. But right now, you're a child, you're a kid, have a good time. That's it, man.
Parents are accusing schools and libraries of grooming their kids. But is this grooming? Some argue the explicit images and topics in these books are essential sex education. Some say that grooming isn't a real thing at all. To find an answer to the question, what is grooming?
Grooming is a real thing. It does happen, but not typically in this context.
I turn to the works of former FBI agent Kenneth Lanning, who spent over 40 years researching, training agents, and consulting on cases involving sexual victimization of children. There are multiple uses for the word grooming. There's grooming an animal. Kate Middleton was groomed to be a lady, and look at her. She ended up married to the future King of England. But here
that line didn't age well. Ooh, you're grooming somebody to be a lady? Oh. Ew.
Grooming in the context of sexual abuse. As Lanning explains it, grooming is a set of techniques used by some child molesters to gain access to their victims and to ultimately control them. He uses the word grooming interchangeably with another familiar word, seduction. So what are these seduction techniques? We're talking about things that might seem harmless, like attention, affection, special privileges. Put simply, grooming tactics are the first steps of non-contact sexual abuse. Please allow me to paint for you a disgusting portrait of how this works. In 2015, the movie Spotlight came out. It told the true story of how the Boston Globe's investigative journalism team uncovered an international child sex abuse scandal. The Catholic Church had been protecting priests who were pedophiles for decades. The film included the story of a real man named Phil Saviano, who was a survivor of sexual abuse in the church. The following monologue explains grooming better than I ever could. When you're a poor kid from a poor family, religion counts for a lot. And when a priest pays attention to you, it's a big deal. He asks you to collect the hymnals or take out the trash. You feel special. It's like God asking for help. So maybe it's a little weird when he tells you a dirty joke, but now you got a secret together, so you go along. Then he shows you a porno mag, and you go along, and you go along, and you go along, until one day he asks you to jerk him off or give him a blowjob, and so you go along with that too, because you feel trapped, because he has groomed you. This isn't a unique experience, and it's never been exclusive to the Catholic Church. Grooming breaks down the barriers between a child and a dangerous predator. At the same time, it raises barriers between a child and their parents. It makes them think they're sexual objects to the adults around them and also to each other. I know what you must be thinking. This is different. No way this is happening in schools.
That is what I'm thinking. But it doesn't mean that it's exclusively not happening in schools. Like, I'm sure there has been instances where this has happened in schools, and that is really sad. Like, I have stomach pain right now just because of how sad that is. And yes, the Catholic Church is quite a big example of grooming in that. And oh God, this is heavy. This is heavy. But these conversations are important. Because ultimately, like, I'm here to protect people as well. I'm here using my voice, spending my time putting this content out there to help children as well, to keep children away from hurtful ideologies, from no matter where they come from. Let's take another deep breath together.
A father in Oregon whose teacher gave his daughter a sexual fantasy assignment.
I want to first say, you're a liar. It's not a rumor. I have the proof right here on my phone of with whom would you do it with? And my daughter specifically stated that the teacher put up a will on the classboard and it stated anal penetration, oral sex, licking up here, kissing, and he wanted them to write down the initials of a boy or girl that they would do these activities with.
Or tell that to the parents in
Okay, what we just heard, that was inappropriate. Horrifically, should not be happening. The way that they're framing this is that it's a comment upon queer people as a whole. There are predators that are queer and there are predators that are not queer. And I don't think there's that much of a disproportion of either. I could be wrong. I don't really have any studies to back that. I don't have any proof of that too, but it doesn't make sense that more queer people are groomers than not. Or more liberal people that support this idea of queerness are groomers than not.
Around the country who found this in their middle schools. It sounds dumb, I know. And I mean, like, obviously I know it's sex when a penis goes inside a vagina. But what about all the other stuff, like oral sex, or hand jobs and fingering? And what about kinky people who do these things that are totally sexual, but it's not like sex, like spanking, or being tied up with ropes and dangled from the ceiling? It may seem hard to believe, but that's not even the craziest part of this. When I talked to Terry Schilling in DC, I left shocked by what he told me.
This all started with Alfred Kinsey and the Kinsey Institute. They started pushing these laws. 37 states have what's called obscenity exemption statutes, and that allows them to put pornographic books in schools. So what's happening is you can be in a school and show children in a classroom books like Genderqueer, books like Let's Talk About It.
Like, okay, this alludes though to a bigger conversation at large, because if I think of my school experience, I was shown like cartoons, not like this, not in the graphic novel sense where it was like conversational, but I specifically remember like up on the whiteboard in grade 5 of my teachers, like there was a cartoon penis and it was like a diagram and there were things that, to be honest, yeah, that didn't encode as the most normal thing to me and that did make me uncomfortable. But like, I don't know, like if that's, I wonder if these people think that kind of content is okay. I don't know, because if I had to make the choice between reading like a graphic novel on my own where it was like informative like this, I think that would have made the concept of learning about sex easier, more comfortable, because there is this like big idea of sex being taboo and things like that. So I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, but I know the right answer is in aligning all queer and trans people with this.
Whatever porn it is, doesn't matter. You can show it to, but if you walk outside that school to the playground across the park and you show those same children the same material, you'll be arrested. We have a nonsensical system where the institutions with authority are able to deliver the most damage and abuse to our children.
I'm in shock.
If you or I gave it to kids in school, parents would have us locked up. It's literally sexual abuse of children.
That led me to Lynchburg, Virginia, and one of the nation's leading experts in children's and parental rights. What is an obscenity exemption?
There are provisions in the law that were put in place roughly in the 50s, 60s, 70s, depending on the state. But they are exemptions from the obscenity criminal statutes.
To break it down, there are criminal laws regarding obscene materials that are considered harmful to minors. This is why it's illegal to sell a Hustler magazine to someone under 18. But in dozens of states, you can show that magazine to any kid of any age in a school or library, and the criminal law doesn't apply.
No, because if it's done like that, like sex ed, at least in my experience up here in Canada, because I experienced sex ed as a student, and I remember there was a form that went home and my parents had to sign it and send it back and you could be exempt. Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, there's obviously different nuances in the United States, so I can't disprove this, but it doesn't sound right.
It's like a get-out-of-jail-free card, except you wouldn't even have to go to jail in the first place.
Illegal and harmful to kids on one side of the threshold, totally passable on the other side of the threshold. How does it become not harmful once you cross the threshold?
It doesn't, but that's the ridiculousness of these exemptions.
Here's another example of what a teacher or librarian can read to your kid in most states.
Hey guys, what you doing? Taking care of business, have a seat. Uh-oh, I think I figured out what taking care of business means. We're each busting a load into this bottle. If you don't come, you have to drink it. Ha ha ha.
Are you wondering if you live in a state where anything goes? We'll get to that. But first, how did these laws come to be at all?
Alfred Kinsey is really the one who started it all.
Kinsey was a zoologist who spent all his time with bugs, but he had a bit of a sexual fetish. So in the 40s, he secured funding from the Rockefeller Foundation. Yes, those Rockefellers, to fund his research at Indiana University, where he wrote and released 2 books on human sexual behavior.
In those books, he made, they're huge 600-page scientific looking, and they have lots of charts and graphs, and they look like they're scientific, and he acted like he had scientifically proven this. He claimed that basically, as far as children go, that children are sexual from birth. Children are not harmed if they engage in sexual activity at any age. And probably the most shocking thing in there are these tables that he has in there that, just you think they're just any old table. But when you read them, he talks about children as young as 2 months old having what he calls orgasms. And you have the 2-month-old, 4-month-old, how many times over a period of time. And we came to learn what he did actually is he used material from pedophiles, serial pedophiles, who when they were abusing the children would keep a diary.
So he didn't actually conduct these.
Okay, Jesus, this is horrendous, and a lot of these things I agree with them on. I don't necessarily know if I've heard them align this kind of inappropriate, illegal behavior aligning with the queer community and trans community, because we're talking about inappropriate content for children in schools, but then this gender conversation and transitioning and being trans hasn't been talked about yet. And that's where I have a problem. A lot of this content is inappropriate, and I think I would agree. And I would agree that it shouldn't be in schools, but it does beg the question, these kids are learning some of this stuff on the playground, a lot of this stuff on the playground. So would you rather have it come from a vetted author that has been also vetted by the school board and that to be able to be in these libraries, or would you rather they read it or hear it from their friends on the playground? I don't know. This one's interesting. This is really interesting. This document, this is well made too and cut together. I'm impressed.
Experiments on the children himself. He just borrowed information from pedophiles who kept diaries of their abuse.
Yes. Now, he may have, it's debated as to whether he actually did any of them or not, or at least observed. We think he at least observed some of the quote-unquote experiments. But for certain, most of the materials were given to him by these serial pedophiles, one of whom was a Nazi.
So a perv calls sexual abuse of children science. One might think he'd be ostracized or jailed, but no.
Once he got the books published, then the Rockefeller Foundation and the people who were associated with them switched gears to the legal system because they needed to change the laws in order to correspond with this new science.
The Rockefellers paid to have an army of lawyers, lobbyists, and legislators write up these exemptions, then managed to ultimately get them passed in 44 states. These are the same people who put up the most famous Christmas tree in the country every year.
Wow.
How sweet. Let's go back in time. You're 12, you're 13, you're 14. What were their focuses in school?
Math,
Geography.
science,
Geography was the big
Geography.
subject.
Did you guys have sex ed?
It was in health. They told you about starting your period, which was a big deal, but it was very quiet then. It wasn't on TV, but that's the only sex ed we had.
We learned very little about the female body. We learned a lot about male sexual reproduction.
Yeah, exactly. The men not being taught about female bodies is what leaves us in a culture where abortion is outlawed. Everybody needs to learn about everybody. I'm sorry. I'll double down on that one. Everybody needs to learn about everybody. You shouldn't just be learning about one side. That creates a culture that participates in the patriarchy.
And basically all the basics, and they also drilled into us how not to get into trouble.
So was there any talk about sex, sluts, and
God,
bees?
No.
Who taught you about that?
My boyfriend, Bob.
Exactly, her boyfriend. Now, who do you think is going to be more informed? The author of a book that's been published and vetted, or this random person's boyfriend? Exactly.
I read all of you have had children, and many of you have grandchildren and even great-grandchildren, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there more that kids should be taught than what you were taught? Sex is just so nonchalant nowadays to the kids. You know, it's no big thing.
It'd be like 10 or 11.
Yeah, sex is no big thing to nobody.
We couldn't seem to land on specifics, so I showed my guests what their grandchildren have at their fingertips.
Hey, so I've been meaning to ask, how is it going with you and Aiden? How's the sex?
Oh, well, it's fine. I mean, he loves it, so I guess it's going good.
If it were good, you would know it. Ooh, I know. Masturbate in front of him.
What?
Yeah. Hear me out. It's not just a super hot and sexy thing, but you'll be literally showing him how you like to be touched.
Ozzy likes it.
This is in school?
Yeah.
Whoa! I think it's too young, too much, too soon.
When it's two kids under 18 and they're having sex, they're not having sex, they're sexually abusing each other because they don't know what is happening.
How did we make the quantum leap from health class in the 50s to encouraging girls to being porn stars for their high school boyfriends today? If you guessed Alfred Kinsey...
Well, that's a little bit hyperbolic because what we just read, or what the story that they just read, wasn't encouraging people to become porn stars. But I don't know. I think this is an interesting conversation to be had. Like, should this content be in a high school? I don't think this content should be in a middle school. That would seem pretty inappropriate in a middle school. But honestly, like, you can't tell me that those elders sitting there weren't engaging in sexual activity under the age of 18. They were. Like, I mean, I can't speak for them, but I was engaging in sexual activity under the age of 18, and I did a lot of things that were stupid and a lot of things that were ill-informed because I wasn't given this education. So I do think it is necessary, but I don't know if it should be in schools rather, or like the age of which that is appropriate. But then it's like, if you think of a high school, you're like, okay, is this appropriate for grade 9? No. Is it appropriate for grade 10? No. Like, even if you think that it might be appropriate for grade 12, which I think it would be, those are like 17 and 18-year-olds. Like, they should be learning about sex. I'm sorry, sex is a human thing. People should be learning about it. It's an important topic. Like, I don't know. I don't think that's inappropriate, but then how are you going to keep that content away from the grade 9s and only have it accessible to the grade 12s? Like, I think there would be ways to do that. Or it might be something that should only be taught at home, but not all of these people are going to be taught this stuff at home. Education is power. This is interesting.
You'd be right. In the 60s, one of Kinsey's most fervent disciples, Mary Calderon, got seed money from Hugh Hefner of the Playboy Empire.
Yikes.
So she left her job as a director at Planned Parenthood and used the cash to found SICUS, the Sexual Information and Education Council of the United States. Sounds important. Today, SICUS is the most influential sex ed organization in the U.S., and its influence can be felt in every school in America. SICUS hasn't strayed an inch from its founding principle that children are sexual from birth. They're using federal funding to fight for even more aggressive laws, currently lobbying for nationally mandated sex education starting in kindergarten. For now, the poor kindergartners...
Well, it's not sex education in kindergarten, but you can do so in age-appropriate ways, I believe. It's not sex education, but it's like identity and gender and that, but these people don't think that's,
limited to topics like this one from the book Grandpa's Pride, which fills them in on Grandpa's kinky S&M life. The people behind the sex for everybody ideology are grateful to know the big kids, meaning 11-year-olds, can see a lot more. Can I show you some stuff?
Yes, please. Oh, I don't think it will be shown in a school. I don't think it's a part of education.
Teachers are not responsible for teaching my great-grandchildren how to stick it up somebody's ass.
Times change, and of course change can be good. But books like this being pushed onto our kids aren't telling the whole story. They leave out important science that could save kids from a lifetime of misery.
Like what?
This one reads, while they're not perfect, barriers like condoms are your best defense when dealing with sexually transmitted infections. The truth is, even proper condom use only reduces the chance of catching genital herpes by 25 to 50%. In their push to normalize everything, this book says, turns out the majority of STIs are treatable and if caught early, no biggie.
That's true. That's true. Most STIs, if found early, are not a problem. Why are we participating in a culture of shame with people who are engaging in sex anyway? Like, of course, there are asexual people who are never going to engage in sex, and we need to leave space for them. But yeah, why are we participating in this culture of shame? That's how you have generations of people who are dying from gonorrhea, like in the past.
No biggie. There are some that are untreatable, like HPV and herpes. Both both of which the majority of people have, even if they're symptomless.
It's literally true. That's literally true. Most people, like, I don't know the numbers, but a striking amount of people have HPV or herpes. Herpes is a cold sore. I remember when I was a kid watching those, like, I forget what kind of commercials they were, but it was like the drugstore commercials where the woman was walking around talking about the cold sore medication. What was that called? I don't remember. Let me know in the comments if you remember. It was like the drug alert, not drug alert, but like, anyway. Ugh.
Is this inaccurate? But painful open sores on your genitals are also no biggie? There are some scary infections out there, like HIV. But you know what? Even that can be treated. HIV and AIDS? No biggie.
It can be treated. Why are we participating in the culture of shame? If you, like, you can't tell me that this woman here has never engaged in a situation that could have left her infected with an STI or an STD. I don't believe that. If you're engaging in any kind of sexual activity, you are at risk for any number of sexually transmitted infections and or diseases. So do you want people to know this or not? What is the point of not letting people have this information in an age appropriate way? If you are engaging in sex, you need to be taught about STIs, period. And we need to dissolve the shame around that as well, because then if people do find symptoms, they'll be terrified enough not to go to the doctor, and then things get worse and worse and worse. Ultimately, at the end of the day, education is power.
Woo! Somebody should have told us in the 80s. Organizations we're supposed to trust are twisting or leaving out scientific facts while also ignoring everything we know about child development. Like the brain, our prefrontal cortex, right here, doesn't fully develop until the mid-20s. So kids only have limited ability to use logic, weigh consequences, and plan. Instead, they rely heavily on the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain, and it shows. If they're not providing real science to kids, what are they doing?
What's the real science that they're missing out on? I haven't heard any real science here. We're only talking about like how something is no biggie and she's shocked about that. Where's the real science?
Grooming them.
Grooming is the act of putting ideas.
Oh, hey, it's whoever that is. This is the president or the founder of the Gays Against Groomer. We've looked at her before on this series.
The child's head that they're not ready for, going against the parent's will, going behind the parent's back, keeping secrets, and essentially I would just say that it's doing something to children that they're not ready for in life.
Around 11 to 12, you become hormones with feet. And one of the things that you really, I think, need...
But like, okay, so yes, hormones with feet. What a weird thing to say. Like, yes, kids don't have access to logic because your prefrontal cortex does not grow together until age 25. So then by that reasoning, kids shouldn't be taught about this until age 25 even. But if you're engaging in sex, you should have this information and you should have this knowledge, period. Because if you don't have logic, how are you expecting these kids to logically make good decisions when they don't even have the base level of information about things like STIs and things? Like, it doesn't follow your own logic to the end. It's problematic.
Teach kids is that actions have consequences.
Psychist teaches sex positivity, that any and all sex is good, and you can have as many partners as works for you, that there should never be any judgment. It's all healthy and normal and wonderful.
You should be able to have as many partners as you want, and it should all, if you're doing so in a healthy way, I think that's fine, and there shouldn't be any shame behind that. What's the point of that? What is that upholding? That's upholding shame in the patriarchy, and it contributes to the infantilization of women and girls, and it contributes to the oppression of women, and it continues down to like limiting access to healthcare and things like that. It's just, they're using some of these things that sound reasonable, and they just continue it to support their ideologies. Oh, look, I'm using the ideologies where just like them. It's, yeah, half of it is right and half of it is wrong.
Age, but the truth isn't that simple, especially for girls who have a wildly different neurological reality than boys. One hormone, oxytocin, has a strong bonding effect for girls, while at the same time disrupts critical thinking and judgment. Maybe we should explain that to girls so they consider getting to know somebody before letting them impair their judgment, and worse, leave them with...
Yeah, that should be taught to everybody, not just girls. That should be taught to everybody, but alongside all of the age-appropriate knowledge about STIs and sexual relations and things like that. Everything should be taught.
Brett when they sober up from the hormonal high. Psychist leaves this science out too.
God, how my life would have been different if I was taught that. Yes, I agree. That should be taught, yeah.
Men and women are simply not wired the same. Psychists, Planned Parenthood, national education...
It's not that men and women aren't wired the same, and again, we've talked about this before here, but it's not necessarily the structure. It's not necessarily the neurological structure between men and women. It is the presence of those sex hormones on the brain, period. So a brain that is masculinized through testosterone behaves differently than a brain who is feminized through estrogen. So that's kind of how they're using this to exclude trans people. But trans people are valid, they do exist, and they share a similar brain function to their cisgender counterparts, especially if they are on hormones.
Association, the American Library Association, the Human Rights Campaign, they all have big influence, and they all conveniently leave out this well-established science when they're telling girls that sleeping around is harmless. Then take into account the physical reality.
It's not harmless in the way that you can't be harmed, but like if you're doing, like, you can engage in sex with multiple partners in a safe way. You can, period. As an adult and somebody who is of the age of consent. Obviously, if you are not of the age of consent, which is, I believe it's 16, I really don't know. But those laws are in place for a reason, and I think they are good laws that should remain there. But then these people inevitably age out of that system, right? So then what? You turn 18 and now you still don't have any of this information? Stop shaming people. Ugh.
Isn't well developed and leaves her at a much greater risk for HPV, which is known to cause cervical cancer. Are we going with no biggie on that one? Then take birth control. They're giving those out like candy. But no one teaches girls that women who take them have a higher risk of getting breast or cervical cancer.
And yeah, birth control. I've had people in my life who have had pulmonary embolisms because of birth control. There's a lot, and like the hormonal problems that can occur with birth control. Yes, all of these things exist. They're real. They should be taught to everybody.
But no biggie. It wasn't that long ago that there was universal agreement that it was virtuous for us to protect the innocence of children.
Virtuous. Again, purity culture, virtuosity, it's all religion coded, and you should probably run.
Yeah, up until 5 minutes ago, this was all common.
Why is it all 5 minutes ago? Who were y'all 5 minutes ago? Did it really only take 5 minutes for you to make this documentary? Make it make sense, ladies.
And it was well known that, the red line you don't cross is going after children. But I think it's kind of been a slow burn leading up to it. But it was so insidious that we maybe couldn't see it until it kind of just boiled over. I think that there are a few motivators behind it. The first one is to normalize pedophilia. And they're using this agenda to kind of...
Nobody's normalizing pedophilia. And if they are, straight to jail. I would agree. That's not appropriate.
That through and to get the public to be okay with it. I think another motivator is obviously money, hooking these children up to the medical industrial complex. Big Pharma loves trans kids.
Side note, Big Pharma also loves kids with STDs. For every year's worth of new STD cases, the medical industrial complex brings in about $15 billion in lifetime medical costs. About half of that comes from people aged 15 to 24. Nothing's better for them than tethering your kids.
Well, 15 to 24 is a huge age range, and you're kind of excluding then, I don't know, I guess I'm not in that age range anymore, but 18 or whatever she said to 24, a lot of that is people who are of age. And if they were educated about these things in a non-shameful way, it would probably contribute to less of these infections.
System for life.
I think that they are scaring people into silence. They're using the LGBTQIA plus community to gain acceptance from it and to make sure nobody speaks out against it, or else you're labeled a bigot, you're labeled a homophobe or a transphobe. And, we take great issue with that because we never consented to any of this being done in our name. We never signed up for this. We never foresaw this coming when we were just fighting for our rights,
There's also other dangers. Children that are getting abused because of that will think that is the norm and they shouldn't speak out. And if we show that we normalize something that's abnormal.
This is from Let's Talk About It. This is a page describing how to masturbate with your anus.
I'm honestly not sure. I understand how it's controversial. I just don't know, if kids don't read about it in school or don't do it kind of in a safe environment, how and when and where are they going to approach this? At least school and textbooks are, they have some guidance. They have a teacher with them.
Yeah, it's regulated. It's regulated, absolutely.
Teachers and librarians will feel talking about this stuff.
That I don't know. I think.
Well, and that's another thing too, because me as a teacher, I'm not comfortable talking about that stuff either, and that's not what I went to university for. So that is part of this conversation as well. It's a lot of onus to be put onto teachers. So in whatever way this heads, you either take all the sexual content out of schools, straight and gay, or whatever, you take all of it out, or you do it in a regulated way where everybody involved has the education and is comfortable doing so. So I can see, again, and I don't disagree with everything that's happening here, but you're weaponizing it with the queer community. It's not necessarily for the queer community, because wasn't that example before talking about a girlfriend and boyfriend? That's not queer. That's not a queer example. Why is that? Yeah. Yeah.
That is probably way more problematic because I don't know if they're receiving proper training with these textbooks. Like, I don't know how they're being like trained or guided into this. And I'm sure it's not always going to be like an easy topic for teachers to approach.
I wonder what anal masturbation training for teachers looks like. If common sense and instincts tell you that
Okay,
kids
that was, you know what? I'll give credit where credit was due. That was a funny cutaway. I'll give it to you, girl.
As
Yeah.
there are decades of research that prove you're right. What happens when a kid is groomed is they get confused about what's appropriate, and they start treating themselves and each other like sexual objects, participating in conversations and activities their minds and bodies aren't equipped for. Dr. Bronwyn Arnold at the University of South Australia tells us that victims of sexual abuse may experience cognitive distortions in relation to abuse, including normalization and positive associations of their abuse experiences. So they get this warped sense of reality. The mind stops working right. Before I get further into the devastating effects of sexual abuse, I have to say this problem we have is way bigger than Epstein Island and way bigger than the Catholic Church scandal. Epstein Island, we're talking about probably a few hundred victims. I'm not trying to minimize what happened to them. It's atrocious. The Catholic Church, probably tens of thousands of victims, maybe more. But this stuff we're dealing with, this grooming in our schools with pornography, sexy drag shows, grouping kids based on who...
Nobody's doing sexy drag shows at schools. Nobody's even doing a drag show at schools. Drag is art, drag is expression, and drag can be done in age-appropriate ways. It can. Just the same way that movies can be age-appropriate and some movies are not age-appropriate. It's the same thing.
Sexually attracted to, the scale is massive. There are just under 50 million children in the American public school system. That's 50 million school children who are sitting ducks. A little more on why this matters. Psychologists at the University of Manchester and University of South Wales analyzed 68 separate studies on childhood sexual abuse, and they concluded that a survivor is 3 times more likely to attempt suicide than someone who wasn't sexually abused as a child. 3 times more likely to attempt suicide. The CDC says people who endure sex abuse as a kid are more likely to have heart disease, obesity, and cancer in adulthood. Depression and PTSD are par for the course. Plus, survivors are more likely to abuse drugs, more likely to have risky sexual behaviors, and catch STDs, and are also more likely to perpetrate sexual violence on others. These things are hard to hear, but they're harsh realities for victims. This kind of abuse even affects physical brain development. One interesting finding is that survivors have an increased likelihood of psychopathology. So you can become a psychopath from being sexually abused as a child.
Well, all of this stuff seems correct and is consistent with what I have learned and read as well. It's just not happening, though, in the fashion that they think it is, or like maybe it's not occurring at the same rate they think it is, or from the communities they think it is.
Keep shoving sex down kids' throats and calling it a right and a natural part of childhood. As if all that weren't enough to make us stop introducing kids to kink. Did I forget to tell you about the kink? Remember the innocent conversation about consent from Genderqueer? That book also includes a casual mention of an S&M website.
Toured the SF Armory, which at the time housed the filming studios of kink.com.
Every kid's got a smartphone.
Yeah,
Have you guys seen kink.com? May I show you?
Please show us.
I've never seen that.
A 7-year-old can just. Oh my god.
Yikes.
Oh.
So this is in middle school, high school libraries, and in some classrooms.
That is.
This is the book.
Yeah, okay. So again, I would agree that shouldn't be in a middle school classroom. It shouldn't really, I don't think that should be in a high school classroom either. But they should be in libraries. They shouldn't be banning these things, period. But yeah.
Largest teachers union in America recommended to teachers for summer reading. Why would teachers need to see this to be more effective? Why do children even need to know this exists?
I wouldn't have that conversation with anyone. Okay, when they were, how old they were.
It's important to say that we can't blame this all on teachers. The vast majority of them are good people with good intentions.
Hey, okay.
A part to give children what they need to be intelligent, productive members of society. It's these powerful organizations that are pushing this on our kids. But unfortunately, there are, in reality, increasing numbers of teachers who are obsessed with children's sexuality and are happy to provide X-rated materials behind a smokescreen of inclusion.
Oh, God.
This has been my first year in preschool with a class of my own. We've been talking about gender and skin color and consent.
Having LGBTQ plus books in the classroom and making sure that our classroom is a...
Well, there's a difference between having books that feature queer stories and like the kink websites that they were just showing. There's nuance there. It's not the same.
A safe space for everyone is so important. I find it important for my students to get to know about other people and different lifestyles. But also, it helps them create an identity for themselves.
Being identified as a member of their family and community was enough for human beings for thousands of years.
No, it was not enough. Ooh, no, that wasn't enough for thousands of years. Also, what, thousands of years? How about we start talking about colonization? Because, I can say it for me. I can't say it unequivocally for her, but I'm a settler on this land, or I'm the children of settlers. I'm a third generation settler here. Like,
The glue that held us together. But apparently, those teachers know better than all of us. With so much focus on diversity, inclusion, who kids are sexually attracted to, you'd think there's nothing else to do in school. You'd think our children are intellectual rock stars ready to pioneer in engineering, literature, and philosophy. Think again. Only 37% of 12th graders reached or exceeded the benchmarks for math and reading that would give them what they need for entry-level college courses.
Yes, absolutely. There is a huge hole in education right now, and people aren't being taught everything that they should be. However, that is not because of the inclusion of queer storylines. It's a completely and almost unrelated issue.
Politicians and school administrators are quick to blame the pandemic. That stat I just gave you, that was from 2019. The U.S. education system's been in free fall for decades. The shutdowns only served to make...
Oh, okay. So I've talked about this on my YouTube channel as well. It's called How Sputnik Changed the World. That's the video on my channel, at least. So the introduction of standardized testing in the Western world, specifically in the United States, was because of the Sputnik Russian satellite. So the reason is education was formed in child-centered progressivism. So it was focusing on the whole needs of the child and developing community attitudes and individualism and things like that. Then when the Russian that's funny, looks like I'm picking my nose. I'm not, I swear. The American government felt that they were behind that of Russia because, oh, look, these Russian scientists can put satellites up onto the moon and we're not. So we need to copy the education system of Russia, which was scientific efficiency, which is standardized testing. Children are to be seen and not heard. They need to sit down, learn reading, writing, and arithmetic, and we'll just ignore everything that makes a child an individual, which is the reason I'm of the belief, and there are studies that support this as well. That is the reason that education has been in a free fall in the way that she's talking about here. Again, it's not the inclusion of queer storylines. It's Sputnik, which is a crazy thing to say, but it's the education system as a whole. It's scientific efficiency. We need to move to a more child-centered progressivism way that deals with the education of the whole child, not just reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Bad situation worse. Before the pandemic, 36% of students were performing below grade level in at least one academic subject.
Yeah.
Now, that's up to 49%. But my favorite disaster comes out of Oregon, where they scrapped the high school graduation requirement that made sure kids could, and I quote, read and comprehend a variety of text, write clearly and accurately, and apply mathematics in a variety of settings. You know why that was scrapped? Because those requirements were racist. Since they dropped the standards, graduation rates are looking great. Unfortunately, last year, roughly only a third of those graduates were proficient in math and reading.
Yeah, I believe that. Not the, I don't believe the racism part. I'd be interested to look at that. I don't have an opinion on that because I'm not educated enough. You see how that works? If I don't have the background or education in something, I don't believe I can form an opinion about it. Yeah, that's on bilingual shade. It wasn't bilingual, I just wanted to say that phrase. Yeah, okay.
This may explain why more and more parents are homeschooling their children. Someone should tell the Oregonians that black homeschool students are scoring 23 to 42 percentile points above their public school peers on standardized tests.
But that's because a lot of these like homeschool kind of situations, because you're learning from like a trusted adult and you're only spending like 2 to 3 hours a day on academic things, which is, she said that in the earlier video. I don't know if that's true for everybody, but like the reason that has a higher success level is because that education is formed in a child-centered progressivist way. It's not because the content is different or better. It's because you're focusing on the child as a whole, because assumedly you're the parent engaging in this homeschool kind of thing. So it does make sense, but not for the reasons they think.
Decided to start homeschooling your boys?
It's something I've always thought about doing, but then we've always been on two separate pages about that. So when he came to me and was like, I think we need to homeschool, it was like, oh my gosh, I think it's the right time.
You know, for us, it was just rooted in, what was going to be best for our kids and their education.
There are these myths, I'm sure you've heard them, about homeschooling, sure. And, there's a few going around. One of them is parents are not qualified to teach.
I think even just, a myth or a stigma of like, homeschoolers are weird and parents are weird.
A lot of parents aren't qualified to teach. There is a fundamental amount of education that goes into how the human brain learns that a lot of parents don't have. So I can agree with part of that. They are probably better positioned to educate their child, but they don't necessarily have the education behind to do that effectively.
Or you worry about what people are thinking, like maybe she's not qualified to teach her kids. But the amount of resources that are out there is really crazy. So we have found so many things that I'm like, I actually think I like this better than public school. Not everything. It's definitely a mix and match for us.
Parents ought to be the ones who are teaching their kids. Like everything, in our opinion, I think the parents...
Yeah, I think that does allude to like a really cool structure of society where parents don't have to go to school and work and parents don't have to go to work so they can spend time with their students at home and this, but that like because of capitalism, that's not the case anymore. And it's crazy how these people are inadvertently, I'm of the opinion that they are participating in capitalism through some of their viewpoints like this, and they just don't see it. Down with capitalism, yeah. Don't make people work so they can spend more time with their children and educate them at home. Put in social services so parents can be educated on how to effectively educate their child and how the human brain works while it's learning and developing. Yes, I'm on board. Do it.
To be kind of the guardians of the gate on how my kids learn to think and how they see the world and how they love others and all of those things.
Sure.
Are you guys familiar with either of these books?
I do feel like I've heard of this one, but I have not actually seen it until today.
I'm gonna apologize in advance for what I'm about to show you. I mean it.
I'm scared.
OMG.
Wow. My kids are not so sheltered that they don't know of things. It's hard because, I mean, I do have boys as well, so I'm not necessarily the person they're wanting to talk to, but we always try to.
Yeah, that contributes to sexism as well. Why shouldn't your boys be comfortable talking to you about sex? You're their mother. That's that culture of the patriarchy, right? You should be comfortable with that. Was I comfortable about talking with sex with my mother when I was a kid? No, but that's because I grew up in the culture that taught me to be shameful about it. So it's weird. Yeah.
Make it like you can come talk to us. It's not like you're going to be in trouble if you see something or hear something that you don't know about. But even some things that have come across in this house, I'm like, okay, you don't actually know some of the things that I feel like some people at this age do know. And I'm thankful for that. I'm like, I want you to stay little as long as you can. Like if you see
I think there's a problem with that because then they're going to go out with their friends and not have any information to like even correct information that's wrong. Like what if your kids go out on the playground? Like I hope homeschool kids have friends and they probably don't have their friends probably aren't all from the same like insider community. But how are you going to, if you control all the information that they're privy to, then there's a huge piece of education that's missing, and they're not going to be able to combat anything that they hear that is unequivocally incorrect from their peers.
Or you see,
because misinformation is out there. Kids, even you can teach a kid to fish. No, you can teach them. Like I remember from being a teacher, you would talk about division or something for so freaking long, and then you hear one of those kids explain how division works to somebody else, and you go, "Were you even listening?" So there's a lot of missing pieces here, and because children don't have that prefrontal cortex development until about age 25, there are a lot of missing pieces. So are you going to take control as the parent and teach them what you believe is correct so that they're able to combat these incorrect things they hear out in the wild, or are you just going to have omission as your form of education?
Sheltered. Yeah. I'm okay with that. That's okay.
Now that you've gotten a glimpse into these books, will you be adding these to your homeschool curriculum?
Absolutely not.
So what can be done about all this? Remember those trusty librarians?
People trust their teachers. They trust their librarians.
Well, the American Library Association has recently been booted out of Montana, Missouri, Texas, and South Carolina.
Those are all really red states, so I don't know. I think she really thinks she did something there, but I don't think she did.
A plank right now in almost a dozen other states. Parents and legislators have simply had enough of their brazen agenda to sexualize America's kids.
And genderqueer?
Genderqueer comes out in 2019, gets challenged in 2021, now banned in at least 49 school districts around the country.
49 districts down, only 13,300 to go.
Yikes.
How about those criminal exemptions for showing porn in schools? In the last few years, 5 states have repealed them in a major victory for children. Congratulations to Tennessee, Arkansas, Indiana, Montana, and North Dakota. More repeals are up for consideration in another 16 states, and they need support from parents. Americans are standing up and fighting for what's right, but getting into this fight isn't always easy.
So you're just fighting to keep children innocent, but the Southern Poverty Law Center has you labeled as an extremist group. What's that like?
We laugh about it. We aren't a hate group. We aren't extremists. Anybody who actually knows us knows that we're all gay and trans, and we're just regular people that want.
You can be homophobic and gay. You can be transphobic and trans. I don't know. People of color can be racist. The logic isn't logicking.
Protect children. We want to fight back against, what's happening.
The backlash is growing against all of us, and it's hard to even blame people for it, but I think that that's why what we're doing is so important. We get comments all the time, every day, saying, you're changing my perception of the gay community, of gay people, because, you know, all you see coming out of the community right now is stuff like this, and the drag queen story hours, and the half-naked drag shows with kids involved. And, you know, a normal person seeing that doesn't really know many gay people, they're thinking that this is just what all of us want, and this is all of our agenda, and that's not true. And so I always remind people that it's actually a fringe minority within our community that want to do this and that are pushing this, but the majority of them are straight, that are actually at the top controlling what, you know, these books that get into schools, or funding these, you know, or pushing for the medicalization, you know, these therapists and these doctors.
And you guys have had a hand in 19 states passing bills that have banned child sex changes. That's like, can you just give me an example of one that you're particularly excited about?
Like, is it sex changes or is it gender affirming care? Because those are two different things.
In the state of Missouri, one of the very first things that I actually got called in to do for Gays Against Groomers was to testify before the Missouri House and Senate. It ended up passing through the legislature. The governor signed it into law. It did get challenged by the ACLU just recently, and but thankfully the courts were sitting in the state of Missouri, and they upheld the Missouri law. Gays Against Groomers had a part in that.
What else can we do to keep protecting children?
The important thing is to get like-minded people elected to local school boards, because that's a lot of the bulk of the work.
You said that most Americans believe that children should be protected from porn, and you conducted a poll recently where you asked people if they think there should be age verification requirements for viewing online porn.
Oh, it was crazy.
Yeah.
It was over 80%.
Yeah,
And it didn't.
Yeah, I would agree. Do that. Why isn't that a thing already? My goodness. Yeah, that should be a thing already. Yeah.
No matter what demographic you were talking to, it didn't matter if it was Democrats, independents, women, men, Hispanics, blacks, whites. It didn't matter. It was an 80-20 issue. And what we're seeing is that's actually playing out in the state legislatures as well. In Virginia, for example. Virginia is I would argue, blue state. You can maybe make the argument that it's purple. It passed the legislature here with only 3 legislators in the Senate voting against it. Everywhere else, it was 100% support, and it was signed into law by Republicans. So Democrats and Republicans, even at the elected level, agree that we need to protect kids from porn online. And so there's a huge amount of ground to gain there. There's 7 states right now. We need to get to all 50.
People are waking up, and they're not afraid of being canceled anymore. But we've only
Yeah, cancel culture is a pig. We've talked about this ad nauseum on this channel here. Of like, yeah, you're only worried about cancel culture if you're being discriminatory, and I think these people are being discriminatory. Not necessarily with what we've heard in the last like 30 seconds, but there is a lot of discrimination, and you're only afraid of being canceled if you are being discriminatory. I said it, sorry. I have never once worried about getting canceled, and it's because I am not discriminatory.
Gun to do the necessary work. It doesn't have to be this way. They're going to tell you your kids aren't being groomed for sex at school, online, or everywhere they turn.
Welcome to the White House. Thank you. Trans rights and human rights. Are we talking this at the White House?
They're going to tell you no one is coming for your kids.
I want to talk to the kids. Hi kids. Hi kids. Hi kids.
They're going to tell you this is all healthy.
That one creator in particular that they just showed, there's a lot of people that really have problems with that individual, and I don't think it's really all that it's cracked up to be with that one. I don't know the pronouns that individual uses, so I'll use they, them. They created that video kind of series addressing children specifically because a lot of these queer kids who are growing up, myself included, did not have somebody who was talking them through any kind of queer experience or queer issues that they might be facing. So it's not that they wanted to talk to the kids in some kind of inappropriate way. They were addressing this to children that they were picturing themselves as when they were young. It's not a please like give this video to your kids and leave the room while I groom them. That's not the situation. But they were talking to kids because they wanted to be that example that they didn't have when they were young. So there's nuance there again.
Sex education, it can only lead to good things.
If you want to hear from me on a personal level, just let me know.
They're going to tell you it's not the American.
But that's not like, I don't know that if you want to talk to me on a personal level, just let me know. I don't think that's necessarily harmful. For that, I mean, I don't know. I don't know much about that creator specifically, so there might be ill intent behind that. I don't know. But if using that one person as an example, like if you're a queer kid who doesn't have the support of your parents at home, somebody out there saying that they're willing to support you and maybe have some of those tough conversations with you, I don't know, I would have appreciated that if I was a kid. Is there room for something potentially inappropriate to happen in situations like that? Absolutely. But I don't know.
The school system you have to worry about, it's the Catholics. Well, I have something to tell them. If a priest telling a kid a joke, if a priest talking about sex, if a priest showing a kid pornography, keeping a secret with a kid, coming between a kid and his parents, If a priest doing those things is grooming, anyone doing those things is grooming. And that includes every teacher who's doing this, every librarian who's in on it, and every school board member and politician who isn't protecting your kids. Get to work, America, because the kids are not all right. Wait, I promised to tell you whether or not you're living in a state with creepy laws that allow pornography in schoolhouses and libraries. Here goes. Alabama, Georgia, Idaho, Texas, Florida. Florida does protect kids up to the 3rd grade. 10-year-olds in the 4th grade can see anything. Let's go, Governor DeSantis. March those fancy boots right on up to Tallahassee and throw some weight behind this. Let's keep going. Iowa, Kansas, West Virginia, Kentucky, Maine, Minnesota, California. Hey, Gavin Newsom. Yeah, you with the hair. Never mind. Actually, California's a lost cause. It'd just be easier to move out. Mississippi, Nebraska, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Washington, D.C. Fun fact, D.C. was the first place these sex ed materials went into schools. Experimenting on minorities is a DC specialty. Hawaii, Illinois, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, New York. They can't be local. How about you take a break from policing free speech and protect the children in your state? North Carolina, Ohio, Oregon, South Carolina, South Dakota, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, Wyoming. If you live in these states, get to work. Here's a list of safe states, but don't get a false sense of security. Obscene books are still popping up all over these places. Tennessee, Alaska, Arizona, Arkansas, Indiana, Missouri, Montana, New Jersey, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Rhode Island.
A reporter asked me a few months ago, where do you see Gays Against Groomers in 5 years from now? I was like, I pray to God we do not have to exist.
To everyone who thinks it's okay to sexualize, sterilize, and mutilate children.
What? Huh? Is that an FU? Well, alright team, I did not finish this phase, but I'm quite close. If you want to see me finish this phase, click on the next episode of Dismantling Hate here on my YouTube channel. Everything that I've said so far really hammers home what I think about these issues. I don't necessarily disagree with everything, but I think the way that they're harnessing this information in order to be discriminatory towards the queer community is hateful and harmful, and that's why we're out here having these conversations, kind of dismantling some of this ill-informed, logical fallacy-filled kind of stuff. So yeah, thank you for joining me on this episode of Dismantling Hate here on my YouTube channel. I've been your host, David Day, and until next time, goodbye.
Ew, David.